Wahkohtowin itself is actually a Cree term about a living life philosophy of the Cree people, in that everything is connected. So right from the ground to yourself as a person, your community, the natural environment, all the living things around you, the crawlers, the swimmers, the flyers, the sky, and then of course the spirit world. It's all connected. We are an advocacy organization as a social enterprise. We are politically cloaked by the First Nations to go out and get what's asked of us to get done.
Wahkohtowin is owned by 3 owner nations: Chappell Cree, Brunswick House First Nation, and Missinabee Cree First Nation, and they all share traditional territory. So they have overlapping traditional territory. When you have 3 nations all working together, and they're all working together to send a message to industry or send a message to government, or to work alongside, to collaborate, there's a lot more traction when you have a group.
I think that's something that we've achieved. We're all continually moving forward as a group, that we have a goal, we have a plan, and we're implementing it. And I think that our relationship, I think as communities, has been our greatest strength.
I knew going through my undergrad in environmental sciences that there was a great injustice that was happening on the landscape. And including First Nations and Indigenous peoples in that management is a very key part of it for me. That's something that I have felt passionate about and have only become more empowered to do things about it since working at Wahkohtowin.
We're dealing with industry players, ENGOs, government, federal, provincial, municipal. That's how big of an influence we have in the region.
In knowing the regional chiefs, the chiefs that are the founding members of Wahkohtowin back some 10 years ago, and in meeting David Flood and hearing the vision about what they hoped Wahkohtowin to be, that it was really about supporting lands and resources departments to help youth, to help members get back on the land, and to really, for those communities to assume their rightful place in land management activities such as forestry.
I think I've learned it's that whole Indigenous worldview, and I'm coming from Western science perspective, and that's completely different. That whole idea of that everything's connected, everything's related. That's a huge change for me personally.
It's really interesting because as a professional forester, as a registered professional forester in the province of Ontario, you take a code of ethics. You operate under certain thinking and covenants. Your job is to make sure that that land and those trees remain in perpetuity for the benefit of the people, not your employer, whether you're working for industry, government, or anyone else. As a forester, you're there to make sure it's there for the long term. I can get behind that thinking.
Some of the work that I've gotten to lead recently and be really involved in is our conservation work. And that's an area where we've really gained a lot of capacity just in the last year or so. And we've worked with community members to identify places on the land that they want to see protected. And we're also in the very early stages of setting up a land trust that's going to be owned and operated by Wahkohtowin and the 3 owner First Nations. So I think in the coming years, Wahkohtowin and the owner First Nations are going to be able to acquire some of the private land in their traditional territories and return that to the nations.
So impact-wise, Wahkohtowin has been a powerhouse with a very small staff, growing consistently over the years. The impacts within community have been very large. Onebowl is a housing corporation that was formed out of Wahkohtowin. It was birthed out of Wahkohtowin, and it was created to address the wicked housing problem that exists in. It's now flourishing. There's all kinds of homes going into community. Community members are being trained in assembling homes, and they have a way into the trades. It's an empowering way to do economic development. It is to be inclusive and create circular economies.
We captured resources to invest in the sawmill and cogen. The cogen is currently owned at about 48%, the sawmill at 20%, and we've got an operating harvesting company, Opewin, that's been around it's going in its 6th operating year.
Wahkohtowin being the driving force for the 3 communities that started this work and now the success of their Guardian program. I think the Guardian program being in Chapleau has opened up doors for other communities in Northern Ontario.
The impact the Guardian program had on me and as a community as a whole really just brings us more together, and all the communities could look back at the Guardian program and see how we gave these kids an opportunity to go on the land, go back to our cultural ways.
You know, we got elders and then we got the really young youth, but the youth in between, we don't really get to hear their voices a lot. So making a space like Wahkohtowin has to voice our concerns and voice what we care about and what our values are is, I think, really important work.
One of the major things that sets working for Wahkohtowin apart from working for another conservation or forestry organization is the cultural elements that we're involved in and the time that we get to spend in community. It really helps us build relationships with community members and build trust that we as Wahkohtowin are working for the benefit of those community members as the rights holders to accomplish the things that they want to see done when it comes to conservation and forestry and the land.
Over the last 10 years, we've really been able to build on both the capacity of our nations to communicate what it is that they want, but also within our own staff capacity to be able to show up to the next round of meetings. We have an equal voice here. Our nations have values that you are going to take into consideration.
One of the biggest achievements I see in Wahkohtowin is the building of the team that came about. There's some amazing people. Over the past 10 years, I've been able to meet just people who have dedicated their life to our lands, the sovereignty, our inherent rights, to fight out there for that, to make sure that it's not forgotten.
Bringing in people, helping the other people, young people, older people, helping this community. We can learn together. And that's what Wahkohtowin is doing, helping people. I haven't seen any other organization doing that.
We're at the table with Ontario. Wahkohtowin is a very useful tool at that table. One of our main goals at Wahkohtowin is to be gentle on the land, but also put First Nations in control of their own territory and their own destiny.
There is a lot of hope and there's a lot of good work being done on this landscape, talking about conservation, forest management, planning, taking care of the land, like stewardship in general. We often get in the news all of the bad news, and we see all of these bad things going on in the forest, like herbicide spray, cut blocks that have tons of slash in them, moose populations going down, and that's all really hard to see and can often make you feel like there's no hope, we're ruined, it's not going to be okay. But I know from working here and the network that we have, there are lots of extremely talented and driven people that are doing this work and pushing to make things better. And that's the message that I would share, is that there's a lot of people doing really good work.
When someone gives me the impression that we can't or we're not allowed to do things, or it's just not the way it's done, David, that's not true. It's important and it needs to be done and it'll get done. So, the work is there. Let's go get it done.